The Velthraxi warship Dominion's Edge cast its shadow across Earth's scarred surface like a metallic storm cloud. Within its gleaming corridors, High Commander Crixavel adjusted his ceremonial combat armor, each piece forged from the bones of conquered species. Today would mark another triumph in the Velthraxi's thousand-year reign as the galaxy's supreme warriors. "The humans have accepted our challenge," announced Sub-Commander Nexath, her voice carrying the characteristic rasp of her species. "They propose 10 champions against our finest." Crixavel's mandibles clicked in amusement. The humans had fought valiantly during their world's conquest, showing more spirit than most species. But spirit meant nothing against the Velthraxi warcast, beings literally bred for combat across dozens of generations. Their bodies were living weapons, reinforced skeletal structures, enhanced reflexes, and neural implants that allowed perfect coordination in battle. "Have they specified which of their military units will represent them?" Crixavel asked, examining his plasma gauntlets. "Curious. They mentioned something called veterans. Apparently these are warriors who have completed their service and no longer fight." The High Commander's laugh resonated through his chest cavity. "Retired soldiers? The humans send us their discarded fighters while we bring our war prime cast?" He gestured toward the 10 Velthraxi warriors preparing in the adjacent chamber, each one a perfect killing machine standing over 8 feet tall, their exoskeletons gleaming with integrated weapons systems. Down on Earth's surface, in a makeshift camp outside the ruins of Denver, a different kind of preparation was taking place. Korvac Steelwright, a grizzled man whose weathered hands bore the scars of 100 battles, carefully cleaned his grandfather's rifle. Around him, 9 other individuals made their own quiet preparations. There was Naya Stormwind, whose prosthetic leg clicked softly as she checked her equipment. Beside her, Tovin Ironfist wrapped tape around knuckles that had been broken so many times they were more scar tissue than bone. Rex Shadowhawk, silent as always, sharpened a knife that had seen action on 4 different continents. These weren't the polished soldiers the Velthraxi expected. They were survivors, men and women who had crawled through mud and blood, who had learned that wars weren't won by the strongest or fastest, but by those too stubborn to quit. "Think they know what they're getting into?" asked Yiska Nightwolf, her dark eyes reflecting decades of hard-won wisdom. Korvac looked up from his rifle. "They think they understand war. They think it's about superior weapons and perfect tactics." He stood, his joints protesting from old injuries. "They don't know that real combat isn't fought in a laboratory or a training facility. It's fought in the spaces between heartbeats, in the moments when everything goes wrong." The transport arrived, a sleek Velthraxi shuttle that would carry them to the arena ship orbiting overhead. As the 10 veterans boarded, they carried with them more than weapons. They carried the weight of every battle they'd survived, every friend they'd lost, every impossible situation they'd somehow overcome. In the arena ship's preparation chambers, the Velthraxi War Prime continued their ritual combat forms, their movements precise and deadly. They had studied human military tactics, analyzed their equipment, calculated probable outcomes. By every metric, this would be a brief and decisive victory. What they hadn't calculated was the difference between soldiers and survivors, between those who fought because they were designed to, and those who fought because they chose to keep fighting when everything else had been taken away. The arena doors began to open. The combat arena stretched before them like a metallic coliseum, its walls lined with thousands of alien spectators from across the Velthraxi Empire. Energy shields hummed overhead, containing the battlefield while allowing the crowd to witness what they expected to be a massacre. Korvac surveyed the terrain with experienced eyes. The arena floor was designed to replicate various combat environments, scattered, cover, elevation changes, and obstacle fields that would test adaptability. But unlike the sterile training grounds where the Velthraxi perfected their techniques, this space felt artificial, Predictable. Standard arena setup, he murmured into his comm. They've trained for this exact environment. Across the arena, the 10 HFY War Prime emerged from their preparation chambers. Each warrior was a testament to genetic engineering and cybernetic enhancement. Their leader, designated War Prime Zekthor, stood nearly 9 feet tall, his armor systems already beginning their pre-combat sequences. Humans! Zekthor's voice boomed across the arena, translated by the facility's universal systems. You face the HFY War Prime, the pinnacle of martial evolution. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Tovan Ironfist spat into the arena dust. Heard that before, from Better Than You. The crowd's roar reached deafening levels as both sides took their positions. Holographic displays showed odds heavily favoring the HFY. Their warriors' enhanced physiology, giving them advantages in strength, speed, and reaction time that seemed insurmountable. But as the countdown began, something unexpected happened. The human veterans didn't assume standard military formations. Instead, they seemed to simply scatter. Yiska Nightwolf melted into shadows near the arena's edge. Rex Shadowhawk found an elevated position that shouldn't have provided cover, but somehow did. Naya Stormwind positioned herself where her prosthetic leg, which the HFY had cataloged as a weakness, actually provided better stability for long-range shooting. The signal sounded. The HFY advanced in perfect formation, their movements synchronized through neural implants. Energy weapons charged, targeting systems locked onto the scattered humans. It should have been a systematic elimination. Instead, chaos erupted. Korvac's first shot took out Zekthor's primary targeting system, not a killing blow, but enough to disrupt the entire formation's coordination. Immediately, the veterans exploited the momentary confusion. What followed wasn't the clean, tactical engagement the HFY had prepared for. It was something else entirely, a style of combat that seemed to break every rule they understood about warfare. Dex Wildstorm, a woman who had survived 6 different urban warfare campaigns, used the arena's artificial terrain against itself. Where the HFY saw cover, she saw weapons. Metal debris became projectiles, energy conduits became traps, and the arena's own systems became tools of misdirection. The HFY fought like they had been trained, precisely, efficiently, with perfect technique. But the humans fought like they had been broken and rebuilt, like they had learned that surviving combat meant abandoning everything you thought you knew about fighting. When War Prime Velkan cornered Lyra Ghostwalker near the arena's eastern wall, he expected an easy kill. Instead, she did something no HFY warrior would ever consider. She pretended to be more wounded than she was, drawing him into a position where his superior strength became a liability. Impossible, Zekthor transmitted to his remaining warriors as their carefully planned assault devolved into something resembling a bar fight. They're using inefficient techniques, but that was exactly the point. The humans weren't fighting efficiently, they were fighting effectively. Every move was born from experience, from battles where efficiency meant death and only ugly, desperate improvisation meant survival. By the time the first round ended, 3 HFY lay unconscious, on the arena floor. The crowd had fallen silent, unable to process what they were witnessing. The humans had suffered injuries too, but they were still fighting, still adapting, still finding ways to turn their disadvantages into unexpected advantages. In the observation deck, High Commander Crixavel watched the tactical displays with growing unease. The battle statistics made no sense. The humans should have been eliminated within minutes. Sir, Subcommander Nexath's voice was uncertain. Should we adjust the parameters? Crixavel's mandibles clicked nervously. No. Let them continue. We must understand what we're seeing. Below, Korvac reloaded his rifle and grinned at his teammates. Round 2, he said. Now they're starting to get angry. Anger was indeed spreading through the Velthraxi ranks like wildfire. War Prime Zekthor's neural implants flickered with battle fury as he surveyed his decimated formation. 3 of his finest warriors lay unconscious, victims of tactics that defied everything he understood about combat. "Regroup!" he commanded, his voice carrying the harmonic frequencies that synchronized Velthraxi battle minds. "Deploy formation Vex 7. The remaining 7 War Prime warriors moved with renewed precision, their adaptive armor systems shifting to counter the humans' unconventional tactics. Energy shields expanded, targeting systems recalibrated, and weapon systems switched to area denial configurations. But the humans had already moved. Gage Ironclaw, a veteran of 3 different guerrilla campaigns, had spent the brief respite between rounds studying his opponent's behavioral patterns. While the Velthraxi analyzed human weapons and tactics, he had been analyzing something far more fundamental, their psychology. "They're hard-coded," he whispered into his comm. "Watch their responses. Every adaptation follows a predictable pattern." It was true. The Velthraxi, for all their genetic and cybernetic enhancements, fought like living machines. Each tactical adjustment was perfect, logical, and utterly predictable to minds that had learned to read the chaos of real warfare. Korvac caught a grenade thrown by War Prime HFY and, instead of taking cover, threw it back with a trajectory that used the arena's gravity fields to curve around the Velthraxi's energy shield. The explosion sent HFY stumbling, not because it hurt him, but because his tactical programming hadn't accounted for humans who treated ordnance like playground equipment. "This is not possible," Zekthor transmitted to his orbital command. "They fight without coherent strategy." But that was their strategy. The veterans had learned something in their wars that no military academy taught. Sometimes the only way to win was to stop trying to win and simply refuse to lose. Naya Stormwind demonstrated this principle perfectly. Cornered by 2 War Prime warriors, she did something that violated every principle of tactical combat. She charged directly at their strongest point. Her prosthetic leg, which the Velthraxi had calculated as a mobility disadvantage, became a weapon as she used its reinforced structure to deliver a kick that sent War Prime Kexdin reeling. The crowd's reaction had shifted from bloodthirsty anticipation to confused silence. These weren't the clean, decisive victories they had come to expect from Velthraxi combat demonstrations. This was something ugly, chaotic, and deeply unsettling. In the command center, High Commander Krixvel found himself leaning forward, his enhanced vision tracking every movement on the battlefield. "Status report," he demanded. 7 War Prime warriors remain operational, reported the tactical AI. However, efficiency ratings have dropped 37%. Predicted victory margin has decreased to... The AI paused, recalculating. "Uncertain. Uncertain." The word echoed through Krixvel's mind like a death knell. In 1,000 years of conquest, Velthraxi victory had never been uncertain. On the arena floor, Yiska Nightwolf had found her rhythm. Moving through the battlefield like a ghost, she struck where the Velthraxi didn't expect, not at their strongest points or their weakest, but at the places where their tactical doctrine created blind spots. Her combat knife, a simple piece of sharpened steel, found gaps in armor systems worth more than most planets' entire military budgets. "They're learning," Zekthor realized with growing alarm. Each human seemed to adapt not just to individual opponents, but to the entire Velthraxi combat philosophy. They weren't trying to match Velthraxi's strength or speed. They were making those advantages irrelevant. Tovan Ironfist embodied this principle. Facing War Prime Mexthor in hand-to-hand combat, he absorbed punishment that should have killed. His scarred body taking damage that would have instantly disabled lesser opponents. But with each hit he absorbed, he learned. His counterpunches became more precise, finding nerve clusters and joint vulnerabilities that Velthraxi physiology tried to protect. "You fight like a machine," Tovan grunted as he grappled with his. opponent. "I fight like someone who's already died twice." The statement made no sense to Mech-Thor's combat processors. But as Tovan's seemingly random movements began to systematically dismantle his defensive systems, understanding dawned too late. By the end of the third engagement, only 4 Velthraxi War Prime remained standing. The humans had lost no one, though several carried injuries that would have sidelined conventional soldiers. Instead, they seemed to draw strength from their damage, fighting with the desperate creativity of survivors who had nowhere left to retreat. The arena had become a classroom, and the galaxy's greatest warriors were learning a lesson they had never expected to face. That mastery of combat meant nothing when facing opponents who had mastered survival. The silence in the Velthraxi command center was suffocating. High Commander Krixavel stared at the tactical displays, his enhanced mind struggling to process what his eyes were showing him. The War Prime, the pinnacle of their military evolution, were being systematically dismantled by a group of aging humans. "Increase arena difficulty," he commanded, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Activate all environmental hazards." The arena floor began to shift. Energy barriers materialized randomly, gravity fields fluctuated, and automated defense turrets emerged from hidden positions. The Velthraxi had designed these systems to test their warriors under extreme conditions. Surely this would level the playing field. Instead, it made things worse. The humans adapted to the chaos instantly, as if they had been fighting in unpredictable environments their entire lives. Which, Korvac realized with grim satisfaction, they had been. Real wars weren't fought in controlled conditions with predictable variables. They were fought in the middle of storms, in collapsing buildings with broken equipment and failing communications. "Environmental hazards active," announced the arena's AI. A gravity well materialized, directly between Rex Shadowhawk and War Prime Kex then, a distortion that should have disrupted their engagement. Rex used it as a weapon. His thrown knife curved through the gravity well's edge, its trajectory becoming unpredictable as it accelerated toward his opponent. Kexa-then's defensive systems, calibrated for linear attacks, couldn't compensate fast enough. "They're using our own arena against us," War Prime Zekthor transmitted, his voice edged with something the Velthraxi rarely experienced: fear. The fear was justified. With each passing moment, the humans seemed to gain confidence while the Velthraxi grew more desperate. Dex Wildstorm had turned a malfunctioning energy barrier into a makeshift weapon, channeling its discharge through her combat armor to deliver devastating electrical attacks. Lyra Ghostwalker used the shifting gravity fields to move in ways that defied Velthraxi tactical prediction algorithms. But it was Gage Ironclaw who delivered the most devastating blow to Velthraxi morale. Facing War Prime Texaval in single combat, he did something unprecedented. He began to laugh. "You want to know the difference between us?" Gage asked, dodging a plasma burst that would have vaporized him. "You fight because you were designed. 2, I fight because I chose to keep fighting when everything else was taken away." The words meant nothing to Texval's combat processors, but their impact was profound. For the first time in Velthraxi history, a War Prime hesitated. That moment of uncertainty was all Gage needed. His attack wasn't the precise, calculated strike of a perfect warrior. It was the desperate, ugly blow of someone who had learned that survival meant doing whatever worked. His combat knife found the one gap in Texaval's armor that the Velthraxi engineers had considered too small to exploit, a manufacturing tolerance that allowed for joint movement but shouldn't have been vulnerable to primitive human weapons. Texaval collapsed, his enhanced systems failing as critical connections severed. The crowd's reaction was unlike anything in Velthraxi history. The bloodthirsty roars had given way to an uncomfortable silence, broken only by nervous clicking and the rustle of thousands of beings shifting uneasily in their seats. 3 War Prime remained, 3 perfect warriors, each representing generations of genetic optimization and technological enhancement. Against them stood 10 humans, battered, bleeding, using weapons that were obsolete by galactic standards. "This is impossible," Subcommander Nexath whispered. "They're just humans." High Commander Crixvel's mandibles clicked in realization. "No," he said slowly. "They're not just humans. There's something else, something we didn't account for in our calculations." On the arena floor, Korvac reloaded his rifle one more time. His ammunition was running low, his equipment was failing, and his body was pushed far beyond its limits. But his eyes held the same fierce determination they had carried through a dozen impossible battles. "Final round," he announced to his team. "Let's show them what veterans really are." The 3 remaining War Prime activated their final combat protocols. Emergency systems engaged, drawing power from their life support to maximize combat effectiveness. They would win this engagement or die trying. There was no middle ground in Velthraxi military doctrine. But as they prepared for their final assault, they faced opponents who had already transcended such simple concepts as victory and defeat. The humans weren't fighting to win anymore. They were fighting to prove something far more important. They were fighting to prove that the galaxy's idea of perfection was wrong. Warprime Zekthor's systems were failing. Neural implants sparked with overload as he pushed his enhanced physiology beyond safe parameters. Around him, his 2 remaining warriors, Vexmon and Kel Ridge, showed similar signs of critical stress. Their perfect armor was scarred, their weapons systems running on emergency power. They were dying, and they didn't understand why. Across the arena, the human veterans looked even worse. Korvac's right arm hung useless at his side, his grandfather's rifle held steady by sheer determination. Naya Stormwind's prosthetic leg was damaged, sparking with each step. Tovan Ironfist's face was a mask of blood, his knuckles raw and bleeding, yet they kept fighting. "Analyze this," Zekthor commanded his combat AI, uploading the battle data to Orbital Command. "How are they still operational?" The response came back in cold mechanical terms. "Human subjects are operating at 347% beyond calculated survival parameters. Current functionality should be impossible." But impossibility had become the theme of this engagement. Every tactical assumption the Velthraxi had made about human limitations had been shattered. These weren't soldiers following doctrine. They were survivors who had learned to function beyond the breaking point. Yiska Nightwolf demonstrated this perfectly. With 2 broken ribs and a concussion that would have hospitalized most beings, she moved through the arena like a predator. Her combat knife, dulled from repeated use, still found its mark with surgical precision. When War Prime Vexmon cornered her against a collapsed barrier, she did something that violated every principle of self-preservation. She grabbed his plasma cannon with her bare hands. The weapon's energy discharge should have killed her instantly. Instead, her combat gloves, primitive by galactic standards, but designed by engineers who understood that soldiers needed equipment that worked when everything else failed, absorbed just enough of the blast to allow her to wrench the weapon. "Away!" "Error," Vexmon Systems reported. "Tactical situation has become non-computable." That was the problem. The Velthraxi had optimized themselves for computable warfare, battles that followed logical patterns and predictable outcomes. But these humans fought in the spaces between logic, in the chaos that emerged when careful plans met desperate reality. Rex, Shadowhawk, embodied this chaos. His equipment had failed hours ago, forcing him to improvise with debris from the arena floor. A piece of shattered energy barrier became a shield. Broken conduits became weapons. His movements seemed random, inefficient, wasteful, until War Prime Kelridge realized he was being herded into a trap made of the arena's own wreckage. "You don't fight!" Kelridge transmitted, his voice heavy with confusion. "You adapt!" Rex's response was a grin made terrible by blood and determination. "We survive!" The word echoed through the arena's translation systems, carrying a weight that the Velthraxi audience couldn't quite grasp. Survival wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about continuing to exist when existence itself became impossible. High Commander Crixavel watched from his command center as his finest warriors struggled against opponents who should have been long dead. The tactical displays showed probability curves that made no sense, combat effectiveness ratings that defied mathematical reality. "Sir," Sub-Commander Nexath's voice was barely a whisper. "Our War Prime are requesting permission to withdraw." The words hit Crixavel like a physical blow. In 1,000 years of conquest, no Velthraxi warrior had ever requested withdrawal from single combat. The concept didn't exist in their military protocols. On the arena floor, Gage Ironclaw and Dex Wildstorm had cornered War Prime Zekthor. The Velthraxi commander was still physically superior, stronger, faster, better armed. But something in his opponent's eyes made him hesitate. "What are you?" he transmitted, his voice carrying frequencies of genuine bewilderment. Gage's answer was simple. "We're what's left when everything else is taken away." The engagement that followed wasn't combat in any sense the Velthraxi understood. It was something uglier, more primal, a demonstration of what happened when beings who had lost everything chose to keep fighting anyway. Korvac, despite his injuries, provided covering fire with ammunition he shouldn't have had. Lyra Ghostwalker moved with grace that her damaged body shouldn't have possessed. Tavon Ironfist struck with power that his exhausted muscles shouldn't have generated. They were operating beyond their physical limits, sustained by something the Velthraxi couldn't quantify or understand, the accumulated weight of every battle. They had survived, every friend they had lost, every moment they had chosen to continue fighting when surrender would have been logical. As the final exchange began, the arena fell silent. Even the Velthraxi audience seemed to understand they were witnessing something unprecedented. Not just a battle, but the collision of two entirely different philosophies of existence. The Velthraxi had perfected warfare, but these humans had mastered something far more dangerous. They had learned how to be unbreakable. War Prime Zekthor's final gambit was as perfect as Velthraxi engineering could make it. His remaining energy reserves channeled into a devastating plasma burst, his targeting systems locked onto the cluster of human veterans, his combat protocols calculating trajectories that would eliminate multiple targets simultaneously. It should have been the end. Instead, something unprecedented happened. The humans didn't scatter or take cover. They moved toward each other, forming a defensive circle that placed their wounded in the center and their strongest fighters on the perimeter. It was a formation that made no tactical sense. It concentrated them in a target-rich environment, eliminated their mobility advantage, and should have resulted in their complete destruction. But it worked. Korvac's damaged rifle fired in concert. With Naya's plasma pistol, their combined fire disrupting Zekthor's targeting systems at the critical moment. Tovin and Gage absorbed the blast's periphery with their own bodies, their combined bulk shielding their teammates from the worst of the damage. Yiska and Rex used the moment of chaos to flank the Velthraxi commander, their movements synchronized. Not by neural implants, but by years of shared combat experience. "Impossible," Zekthor transmitted, his voice carrying harmonics of system failure. "Your formation should have resulted in maximum casualties." Dex Wildstorm's response carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. "You're thinking like a machine. We're thinking like family." The word didn't translate properly into Velthraxi linguistics. Their society had concepts for breeding units, tactical partnerships, and hierarchical structures, but the human notion of chosen family, bonds forged in shared suffering and mutual sacrifice, was alien to their understanding, but its effects were undeniable. When Lyra Ghostwalker took a plasma burst meant for Gage, she didn't fall back or calculate optimal medical response. She kept fighting, drawing strength from the knowledge that her sacrifice had meaning. When Tovan's ribs cracked under the impact of Zekthor's physical assault, he used the injury as leverage, allowing his opponent's momentum to carry him into a chokehold that his undamaged body couldn't have achieved. High Commander Crixvel's command center had fallen silent except for the steady stream of system alerts. Every tactical prediction had failed. Every combat algorithm had been rendered obsolete. The War Prime, the pinnacle of Velthraxi military evolution, were being systematically defeated by beings who should have been corpses. "Sir," Sub-Commander Nexath's voice was hollow, "Zekthor is requesting immediate extraction." Crixvel's mandibles clicked in patterns that hadn't been used since the early days of Velthraxi expansion. Confusion, uncertainty, and something approaching fear. Denied. The engagement continues until victory or death. But on the arena floor, those concepts had lost their meaning. Victory and death were abstractions for beings who had never truly been tested. The humans fought with a different understanding that some things were worth more than victory, and that death was just another obstacle to overcome. Korvac demonstrated this philosophy as he faced Zekthor in what should have been the final exchange. His rifle was empty, his body was failing, and his opponent was still physically superior in every measurable way. Logic dictated surrender or death. Instead, he began to speak. "You want to know what makes us different?" Korvac's voice carried across the arena, translated into frequencies that every Velthraxi could understand. "You perfected your bodies, your weapons, your tactics. You eliminated every weakness, optimized every variable. Zekthor's plasma gauntlets charged for a killing blow. And you remained primitive, flawed, weak." Korvac smiled, and the expression was more terrible than any weapon. "We remained human, and that's something you can't compute. The final exchange wasn't decided by superior firepower or enhanced physiology. It was decided by the accumulated weight of experience. Every battle scar, every loss, every moment when giving up would have been easier than continuing to fight." Korvac's attack was simple, almost crude by Velthraxi standards. A piece of arena debris, thrown with the accuracy of a man who had learned to make every shot count because ammunition was precious and second chances were rare. It struck Zekthor's helmet at precisely the right angle to disrupt his neural interface, sending feedback through his enhanced systems that no amount of optimization could overcome. The War Prime commander fell, not to superior technology or genetic engineering, but to the simple physics of momentum and the accumulated wisdom of a man who had learned to fight with whatever was available. The arena fell silent. The three remaining War Primes stood motionless, their combat protocols unable to process what they had witnessed. Around them, 10 human veterans remained standing, battered, bleeding, but unbroken. The silence stretched for long moments before Crixvel's voice echoed through the arena's communication systems. "This engagement is concluded. The humans have achieved victory." But as the words left his vocal apparatus, Crixvel realized that something far more significant had happened. The Velthraxi hadn't just lost a battle. They had discovered that their entire understanding of combat, of strength, of what it meant to be a warrior, was fundamentally incomplete. In the arena below, the human veterans didn't celebrate. They simply stood together, supporting their wounded, their eyes carrying the quiet satisfaction of those who had proven something important, not just to their enemies, but to themselves. They had shown the galaxy that mastery wasn't about perfection. It was about endurance. The Dominion's edge hung in Earth's orbit like a monument to shattered certainty. In the hours following the arena combat, High Commander Crixvel had received reports from across the Velthraxi Empire, military analysts, demanding explanations, genetic engineers questioning their optimization protocols, and War Prime commanders requesting immediate tactical updates to counter human combat methods. But as Crixvel reviewed the battle recordings for the 100th time, He realized that no tactical update could address what they had witnessed. Humans hadn't won through superior strategy or advanced technology. They had won through something far more dangerous, an understanding of warfare that the Velthraxi had never encountered. "Sir," Subcommander Nexath approached with visible hesitation, "the human representatives are requesting an audience." Crixvel's mandibles clicked in patterns of deep thought. Protocol dictated that defeated species submitted to Velthraxi, authority immediately following conquest. But these humans had changed the fundamental equation. They hadn't been defeated. They had demonstrated something that challenged the entire foundation of Velthraxi military doctrine. "Bring them to the command center," he ordered. "All security protocols remain active, but treat them with the honors due to worthy opponents." The concept felt alien in his mind. The Velthraxi had never recognized worthy opponents, only obstacles to be overcome and resources to be claimed. But as the 10 human veterans entered his command center, Crixvel found himself seeing them differently. Korvac led the group, his damaged arm now properly treated, but still clearly injured. His ancient rifle was slung across his back, its worn metal surface a stark contrast to the gleaming technology surrounding them. Behind him, the other veterans moved with quiet confidence, their eyes taking in the command center's tactical displays and weapon systems with professional assessment. "Hi, Commander," Korvac's voice was respectful but not deferential. "We need to talk." "Indeed," Crixvel replied, gesturing toward the tactical displays that still showed the arena combat statistics. "Your victory was unexpected. Our analysts are struggling to understand how you achieved what should have been impossible." Naya Stormwind stepped forward, her prosthetic leg clicking against the metal flooring. "That's the problem with your analysis. You're trying to understand us the same way you understand everything else, as a problem to be solved with better technology or superior genetics." "Are we incorrect?" Crixvel asked, genuine curiosity overriding military protocol. Tovan Ironfist's scarred knuckles flexed as he considered the question. "You perfected warfare, made it clean, efficient, predictable. But war isn't any of those things. War is chaos, and chaos doesn't care about your perfection." The statement resonated through the command center in ways the translation systems couldn't fully convey. The assembled Velthraxi officers shifted uncomfortably, their enhanced minds struggling with concepts that challenged everything they had been taught. "You speak of chaos, as if it were an advantage," Crixvel observed. "Our optimization eliminated chaos from our combat doctrine." Yiska Nightwolf's response was quiet, but carried the weight of experience. "You eliminated chaos from your doctrine, but you didn't eliminate it from combat. So when real chaos hit, the kind that comes from desperation, from fighting with broken equipment and impossible odds, your doctrine had no answer." Rex Shadowhawk, silent until now, spoke with the measured cadence of someone who had seen too much. "We learned to fight in the chaos because we had to. Every war we've ever fought has been chaos. Every battle we've survived has been chaos. You can't optimize chaos away. You can only learn to thrive in it." The implications of their words began to sink in across the command center. The Velthraxi had spent centuries perfecting their approach to warfare, eliminating variables and optimizing outcomes. But in doing so, they had created a fundamental vulnerability. When faced with true chaos, their perfection became a weakness. "Show them the recordings," Crixvel commanded, and the arena combat played across the command center's main display. "Analyze this engagement and explain to me how 10 aging humans defeated our finest war prime." Gage Ironclaw watched the recording with professional interest, occasionally nodding at tactical decisions he recognized. "You want to know the real difference between us? You fight like you've never lost anything. We fight like we've lost everything and chosen to keep going anyway." The words hit the assembled Velthraxi with unexpected force. Their society had optimized away loss, eliminated failure from their military culture. But these humans had been forged by loss, shaped by failure, and somehow transformed those experiences into strength. Dex Wildstorm gestured toward the tactical display. Every move we made in that arena came from battles we've lost. Every technique we used was learned from mistakes that cost us friends, comrades, people we cared about. You can't replicate that with genetics or technology. Our scars are our tactics, Lyra Ghostwalker added, her voice carrying the weight of countless battles. Every wound teaches you something new about staying alive. Every loss shows you how to prevent the next one. You optimized away the ability to learn from failure. Crixvel's enhanced mind processed this information, cross-referencing it with centuries of Velthraxi military doctrine. The analysis was unavoidable. Their pursuit of perfection had created a critical blind spot. They had eliminated the very experiences that made the humans so dangerous. You're suggesting that our strength is our weakness, he said slowly. Korvac nodded. Your warriors fight like machines because you made them into machines. Perfect, efficient, optimized machines. But we fight like survivors because that's what we are. And when machines meet survivors in real combat, the survivors have an advantage you can't calculate. The silence that followed was profound. Around the command center, Velthraxi officers who had spent their lives studying warfare found themselves confronting a truth that challenged everything they understood about military superiority. What do you propose? Crixvel asked finally, his voice carrying harmonics that his officers had never heard before, uncertainty mixed with something approaching respect. Korvac exchanged glances with his fellow veterans before responding. Earth isn't your typical conquest. We're not going to surrender because you have superior firepower or advanced technology. We've faced those advantages before and found ways to overcome them. But, Naya interjected, her prosthetic leg clicking as she shifted position, we're not interested in a war that destroys both our species either. We've seen enough destruction to know that victory without wisdom is just another form of defeat. Crixvel's mandibles clicked in complex patterns. Calculation, consideration, and growing understanding. You're offering cooperation instead of conquest? We're offering to teach you something your optimization couldn't provide, Tovan said, his scarred hands gesturing toward the tactical displays. How to fight when everything goes wrong. How to adapt when your perfect plans meet imperfect reality. The proposal sent ripples of shock through the Velthraxi command structure. Their society was built on conquest and domination, not cooperation with supposedly inferior species. But the arena combat had demonstrated that their assumptions about inferiority were fundamentally flawed. In exchange for what? Crixvel demanded, his military training reasserting itself. Yiska's response was simple but profound. In exchange for learning something from you as well. Your technology, your organizational capabilities, your ability to coordinate across vast distances, these are strengths we could use to protect not just Earth, but other worlds facing threats you haven't encountered yet. What threats? Sub-Commander. Nexath interjected, her voice sharp with professional concern. Rex Shadowhawk's expression grew grim. The galaxy is larger than your empire, Commander. There are things out there that don't care about your optimization or our improvisation. Things that will require both of our strengths working together. The implications hit the Velthraxi like a physical blow. Their expansion had been so systematic, so successful, that they had assumed they were the dominant force in the galaxy. The possibility of threats beyond their experience was both terrifying and intellectually fascinating. "Show us!" Crixvel commanded, and the humans began to share intelligence that changed everything. Data streams filled the command center's displays, evidence of ancient artifacts that responded to no known technology, energy signatures from beyond the galactic rim, and most disturbing of all, the remains of civilizations that had achieved technological advancement far beyond even Velthraxi capabilities before being utterly destroyed. "The Devourers," Gage said quietly, using humanity's term for the entities they had detected at the very edges of explored space. They don't conquer worlds, they consume them. Technology, biology, even the quantum structure of matter itself. Your optimization and our adaptation are both just different forms of food to them. The command center erupted in clicking mandibles and harmonic frequencies as Velthraxi officers processed this information. Their military doctrine had no protocols for entities that could not be fought through conventional means. This is why we can't afford to destroy each other, Dex added, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen civilizations fall. Separately, we're just resources waiting to be consumed. Together, we might be something they can't easily digest. Crixvel studied the data for long minutes, his enhanced mind running calculations that grew more disturbing with each iteration. If this intelligence is accurate, neither of our species has sufficient capability to address this threat independently. That's what we're hoping you'll understand, Korvac said. Your empire has the resources and coordination to mount a galactic defense. Our species has the experience to adapt when that defense inevitably fails in unexpected ways. You're certain it will fail? Crixvel asked. Lyra's smile was grim but oddly reassuring. Commander, every plan fails when it meets the enemy. The question isn't whether your defenses will hold perfectly, it's what happens when they don't. The weight of this revelation settled over the command center like a heavy blanket. The Velthraxi had built their empire on the assumption that superior force and optimization could overcome any obstacle. Now they were facing the possibility that their greatest military achievements might be inadequate against threats they couldn't yet comprehend. What are you proposing specifically? Crixvel asked, his voice carrying frequencies of serious consideration. A partnership, Korvac replied. Your empire provides the framework, the ships, the technology, the coordination across multiple systems. Our people provide what your optimization eliminated, the ability to adapt, to improvise, to keep fighting when all the careful plans fall apart. Joint training programs, Naya added. Your war prime learning from our veterans, our soldiers learning from your tactical coordination. Both sides becoming stronger through understanding each other's approach to warfare. Tovan's contribution was characteristically direct. And when the real fight comes, and it will come, we face it together instead of wasting our strength fighting each other. The proposal hung in the air like a bridge spanning two entirely different philosophies of existence. On one side stood the Velthraxi, masters of optimization and perfection. On the other stood humanity, survivors who had learned to thrive in chaos and uncertainty. Between them lay the possibility of something neither had achieved alone, a form of military capability that combined the best of both approaches while eliminating the critical weaknesses of each. High Commander Crixvel looked around his command center, seeing his officers grappling with concepts that challenged everything they had been taught. Then he looked at the human veterans, seeing in their scarred faces and steady eyes the accumulated wisdom of countless battles survived against impossible odds. You have given us much to consider, he said finally. This proposal would require fundamental changes to our military doctrine, our expansion protocols, our entire approach to galactic relations. Change is hard, Yiska acknowledged, but extinction is permanent. The simple truth of that statement resonated through the command center. The Velthraxi had conquered 1,000 worlds by avoiding change, by perfecting a system that worked consistently across different environments and species. But perfection, they were learning, was a form of rigidity that could become catastrophic vulnerability. I will convey your proposal to the High Command, Crixvel said. But understand, if we proceed with this partnership, it will not be as conquerors and conquered, it will be as equals. The word felt strange in his vocal apparatus, but it also felt right in a way that surprised him. Korvac extended his hand, a human gesture that the translation systems struggled to convey properly. equals with different strengths. That's all we've ever asked for. As Crixavel reached out to clasp the offered hand, he realized that this moment would be remembered as a turning point in galactic history. Not the moment when the Velthraxi conquered Earth, but the moment when two species chose cooperation over domination. The moment when the galaxy's greatest military force learned that true strength came not from perfection, but from the wisdom to recognize when perfection wasn't enough. Outside the command center's viewports, Earth turned slowly in the void, its scarred surface bearing witness to countless conflicts and the species that had learned to endure them, all. And in the depths of space, beyond the reach of current sensors, ancient threats stirred in response to activities they had long been waiting to detect. The real war was still coming, but when it arrived, it would find not a galaxy divided between conquerors and conquered, but a partnership forged in mutual respect and tempered by the understanding that survival sometimes required abandoning everything you thought you knew about victory. The veterans had taught the galaxy's greatest warriors their most important lesson, that being unbreakable meant being willing to break your own assumptions when the situation demanded it. And in that lesson lay the seeds of hope for challenges yet to come.